Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here, taking a look at the feature race at Belmont Park on Saturday. Race 6 is the Wild Applause Stakes, going the 1 mile distance, around one turn and a little then some on the Widener turf course at Belmont Park. And we'll throw up the field for this race. Craig, 8 runners signed on for the turf. The number 9, She Booty, is an MTO in this race. And if this race does get rained off the turf, which there is a minor chance, there's some rain predicted in the area Thursday through Saturday. So we'll see how that plays out. But She Booty would be a likely winner on the main track, but we're going to handicap this race as if it's as it's scheduled for the turf. And we've got some nice runners in here, breath away from the Christophe Clement stable, as well as a couple of Chad Brown trainees, the number 2 and number 3.
Yeah, a lot of big name connections in here, but there's some others that also have a shot. I think it's a good betting race with several different directions you could go.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely looks like a competitive affair. One key factor in this race could be how the early pace shakes out, because it looks a little murky, Craig. And this is a pace projector that I think we have to talk about a little bit, because some people might be surprised to see the number 5, Cecile, shown on the early lead, just given the way that she ran in her most recent start, which was her only turf race. And it's kind of a difficult situation for the Timeform US algorithm that creates the pace projector, because it takes into account all of her races, and she showed speed on the dirt but completely changed her running style last time on the turf. So it would be a little surprising if she wound up on the lead in this race.
I agree. I'd be surprised if she's in the front. I don't think she's going to be last like she was last time when she made that big run, unless that's just the plan. The trainer tells Julien Leparoux to drop back to last and try to make a run. I think she had some trouble at the start, and she did show some speed in the dirt races. And the horses we have shown in behind, the 6 and 7, have shown more tactical speed, more positional speed. So I would expect those two to be in the front.
Yeah, I would agree. The number 7, Carrie, is coming out of sprint races. I could see her going to the front. And then, as you said, some others do have some tactical speed in here as well. So we'll see how this plays out as far as the pace goes in this Wild Applause. Well, let's go through the main contenders, and we'll take this field in post-position order, giving a mention to every one of the runners that's entered for turf in this race, beginning with the number 1, Violet Gibson. And we'll take a look at her last race, which came in the Honey Rider Stakes at Gulfstream Park. She closes for 3rd this day, Craig, and doesn't really look like she's going anywhere at the top of the stretch, but she angles to the inside in the late stages and seems to hit her best stride. She's coming on decently at the end of this race, never really threatening to win it. She's run okay in both starts down in Florida. I guess the most notable thing about her is that she's going to be the first New York starter for trainer Saffie Joseph since the Wood Memorial back in early April.
Yeah, and Saffie Joseph, I didn't pull up Formulator, but I mean, I follow enough to know that he doesn't do all that great when he ships into New York. And this horse looks a little bit overmatched on paper and speed figure wise, so she'd be a reach for me.
Yeah, she's one who would be hoping the pace heats up a little bit, because she needs the speed to come back to her a little bit. The number 2 is one of those Chad Brown trainees, Tax Implications. Let's take a look at her last race, which came back in October of last year when she was a 2-year-old in the Chelsea Flower Stakes. And you could see that Manny Franco, who was riding her this day and is back on today, is whipping her left-handed pretty vigorously, trying to prevent her from lugging in. And you could see she's kind of leaning in for the entire stretch drive. And right here, as they come onto the wire, he has to snatch her a little bit and can't really go after that leader because she's trying to duck in behind that foe. So definitely some greediness on display for Tax Implications that day. But Craig, this filly showed a lot of talent in her debut at Monmouth last year, where she was a very impressive winner, making a late run into a slow pace and easily finished ahead of Liguria, who she's going to face again here as her stablemate.
She definitely has talent. You can see she ran that 101 speed figure. That was downgraded because of the fast pace. You can tell by the P designation next to the number. And it was a pretty strong race for 2-year-olds. And that 101 speed figure has every right to improve by several points, with this filly not returning until late June. And when you look at her work tab, she's been working steady for a long time. So if Chad Brown's been able to get those greenness issues solved, she's a major player.
Yeah, it's taken some time to get her back to the races, but Chad Brown, one of the best in the business off layoffs, does well in turf stakes races, especially non-graded stakes events on the turf off layoff. So she definitely seems like a player in this race. The number 3 is Liguria, the other Chad Brown trainee. Like we said, she was no match for Tax Implications when they both debuted at Monmouth, but Liguria has obviously improved since then, and we saw evidence of that in this Jimmy Durante Stakes, a grade 3 event from last December at Del Mar. And Craig, the fact that she went off at 7-5 in this 12-horse field, I think speaks to maybe the lack of quality that was on display in the Southern California Turf Division last year, as she was the shipper that came in and dominated that group. She came off the layoff in a pretty tough spot last time at Churchill, so maybe we shouldn't be too hard on her for finishing off the board that day.
I think the truth probably lies somewhere in between those two races. She probably fits a little bit better here than she did in the grade 2 Edgewood. The grade 3 Durante was not the strongest contest, as you note. I do think she didn't really have much of an excuse last time, and she has the kind of running line that worries me a little bit. And maybe that speed figure is a little inflated, as she just stayed inside, tucked behind horses, and kind of sucked into a decent finish without making any real moves.
Yeah, I saw the exact same thing in her trip last time. She was kind of locked in behind foes, but it never really seemed like she had the run to get out of that spot. So I don't want to say it was a bad trip or suggest anything like that. She's got Irad Ortiz getting aboard here, so maybe she's going to take a little more money than she should relative to her stablemate who has Franco aboard. We'll see how that shakes out with regard to the prices, but she is one that does have to kind of prove where she fits from a quality standpoint. The number 4 is I'm Just Kiddin'. Let's take a look at her last race, which came against New York-bred Allowance Company, going the mile and the 16th distance, so a little farther than this, on the inner turf course of Belmont. And she does get the victory by disqualification this day, Craig. I thought the call was a little iffy. I'm not sure that she really merited to be put up by a DQ. There was a bit of a bump there in mid-stretch, but regardless of what happened in the stretch, I think the early part of this race is actually more of a reason to like her out of this spot, because she did not have the easiest trip breaking from post 10 in that 10-horse field.
No, she was wide around the first turn. And as you see, it wasn't just that she was wide. The pace was incredibly fast. She was making an early move into it. She was eager to go. It's actually a race we downgraded again because the pace was so fast. It probably made the final time a little better than it otherwise would have been. But I thought she ran a really strong race, and that 106 speed figure fits pretty nicely in here.
And you might say, where did that number come from? Because she hadn't run close to that in her prior starts. But this is a filly that you can make some excuses for. I thought they rode her the wrong way in the Miss Grillo last year when she could have been on the lead. I think a lot of us projected that she'd be on the lead that day, but they decided to rate her. I think that proved to be the wrong move in a race that was dominated up front. And her return from the layoff going 6 furlongs, that's a race where it just seemed like the connections weren't that interested in winning the race. She got a very conservative ride from Jose Ortiz that day, let's say, and they were more serious last time, but I think the trip worked against her, and the 1-turn mile might be perfect for this daughter of Justify. Moving on to the number 5, Cecile. She's a runner who didn't show too much in her first couple of starts on the dirt, chased the pace each time and faded. But last time out, totally different story when she got on turf for the first time. Did have some serious trouble at the start, broke a little slowly and was bumped. So I think that's why she was so far back in the early stages. But boy, did she unleash some late run through the stretch, Craig, as she legitimately went from last and 12th all the way to first in the final 3/16 of a mile.
It was an eye-catching move. I wouldn't hold that 97 speed figure against her. It's a case where the trouble at the start that we mentioned when discussing the pace projector probably did cost her on the speed figure scale, but it was an impressive performance, and I would fully expect her to improve that number by a few lengths at least.
Yeah, Lindsay Schultz, the trader, I can't recall having a prior starter in New York, but does a very good job out of town. Nice ROI. So we'll see what we get from Cecile as she ships into the NYRA circuit. The number 6 is Soviet Excess. Let's take a look at her last victory at Gulfstream Park when she won an N1X allowance race optional claiming event, going off as the 3-2 favorite and delivering. This was her second victory in a row. She had broken her maiden on synthetic in her prior start, and nothing really to knock about her progression, Craig. I mean, she's won the last couple of races pretty comfortably. Just feels like this is a much tougher race than the allowance event that she was competing in last time.
Yeah, much tougher. It's she couldn't find the winner's circle till after Florida Derby Day when the competition gets weaker at Gulfstream Park. She's won her last two, but it's just a huge jump in class in my opinion. Even though the race rating doesn't show it as one, I think it's even bigger than the 5 points that we show.
The number 7 is Carrie, who seems like one of the potential pace setters in this race. She'll be stretching out from 5 furlongs all the way to this 1 mile distance. So that's a big ask in and of itself. She's also going out for a new barn for the first time. She was sold at the Keeneland April sale for $85,000. She's now switching over to Joe Sharp, who frankly doesn't have the best numbers off trainer switches on the turf. Just a lot of things working against this filly, Craig.
I agree. I guess the one good sign is that she did show more early speed last time than she had earlier in her career. Not just positionally, but you can see the pace figure took a big jump and she was right up there on it. But the stretch out to a mile seems like a pretty steep hurdle to me.
And closing out the field is the number 8 Breathaway, who I did peg as the morning line favorite of this race. She's a horse that's taken a lot of money in all of her starts so far, and she's generally rewarded the backers. She's run well every time, finished in the exacta in all 4 career starts, though she was beaten as the favorite in this last race that we're taking a look at here, the Hilltop at Pimlico. She went off at 9-5, got the pace that she needed, and came through between horses, but just couldn't quite withstand the late challenge of a spray to the outside, a Chad Brown runner who was able to run her down at the edge. So don't love that she got outclosed in that race, Craig, but she was impressive too back when she made that big late run at Gulfstream. The 1 mile distance works for her. I think it's just a question of whether or not the pace is going to work out for her on this occasion.
I'd agree with that. She's had pretty good pace setups in the last 2, and she's ran well. I do think this is a little bit tougher. You can see both of those we've knocked down a little bit because of that fast pace, something we do on turf to kind of even things out because of the wide disparity in turf scenarios that we see. But I'm just a little leery the way she got passed after getting a perfect trip in a race of similar quality.
Well, let's throw up our picks for this race, and Craig and I are landing in a similar spot here with the number 4. I'm just kidding. I did pick her at 10-1 in the morning line. We'll see if she goes off that high going out as a New York bred. Maybe she's not going to get some respect, but I think we both believe that she deserves some respect in this spot, Craig.
I do. That last trip was just too good to pass up for me. I was happy to see your morning line. I hadn't seen it when we made our selections. And yeah, with some of the name trainers that we get in here and name riders going in different directions, it's very possible we're going to get that. And I just think she's a lot better than some of those running lines look in her last couple of races.
Yeah, as you can see, Craig and I agree on the exacta here. We both have I'm Just Kidding over the number 2 taps implication. So I think we both agree among the short prices is the one that you have to fear the most based on the potential that she showed last year. So let's look at the Wild Applause Stakes at Belmont Park on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.